If you want to know what it takes to make the Forbes 30 under 30 list as an engineer, if you're curious about a career in sustainable energy, or what it takes to start in India and finish your engineering degree in the US, then this interview replay is for you. All that and more coming up. Hey 1% Nation, I'm Jake Voorhees, and you are watching the 1% Engineer Show, where we empower young engineers to rise to the top 1% of their career. If this is your first time here, guys, make sure you subscribe because I release videos 2 times a week for engineering success. And if you want the 1% Engineer Kit and access to the Facebook group, follow the links in the description. And if you have a question about anything in this interview, comment below. So let's jump right into this Forbes 30 under 30 list interview with Tirthak Saha. Enjoy. Hey 1% Nation, I'm so excited to have Tirthak Saha on the show today. Tirthak was just awarded the Forbes 30 under 30 list for the energy sector. I don't know if it's an award technically, but you've been mentioned on that list. So I'm so excited to talk with him today and have him share some things about energy and sustainability engineering. But Tirthak has a 2-in-2 degree program starting in India and then wrapping up at Drexel for his electrical engineering program there, which was really cool because I just spoke on a panel there. So it's kind of like engineering brotherhood going on here. Besides electrical engineering and being an energy thought leader, Tirthak is also a writer, multiple published, I guess, writer as well within engineering textbook and personal brand, website content creator, past athlete, speaker, and lately Tirthak is also on the Pennsylvania Space Grant commission member and also is chair of the ECE Industrial Advisory Board at Purdue at Fort Wayne. So Tirthak, thank you so much for being on the show. Why don't you say what's up to 1% Nation and fill in any gaps in that intro?
No, thank you so much, Jake, for having me on this. I really enjoy your series, and I think it's really helpful for the whole engineering community, especially the younger ones who are just starting out and figuring stuff out as they go. I know I definitely would have appreciated it when I started out, so it's just great to be here. That intro was great. I don't think it could have done any better. Yeah, that's pretty much everything. I kind of like to, and I'm guessing that we'll talk about this a little more in depth as we go into the questions, but I kind of like to dabble in a little bit of everything. I like to have my fingers in all the pies. It's just who I am. So I'm also an artist. And if you go to my website, you can find some of my art. I recently helped a friend illustrate her first novel, which got published. So that was a pretty cool experience, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I write my own blog, The Futurist Archives, that has a different mission. It's just advocating science and technology for people who may not be that scientifically or technologically inclined, trying to get them interested in this world because this really affects everyone. So yeah, that's pretty much the fun side of me, and on the engineering side, you pretty much mentioned everything that I do. So
thank you. So first off, I want to make sure I don't mess this up anymore. So yeah. It's the Forbes 30 under 30. Do I just say list, or is it technically an award? Like, how do I call it? How do I describe it?
So this is a question I have been grappling with ever since I got the news, because I wanted to put out posts like describing what has happened, and I was like, wait, what do I say?
Yeah.
And then I came upon this sentence, I guess, which works. I have been awarded a spot on the list.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Just being on the list is the award, is the achievement. Right. Yeah. This is so great. First of all, massive congratulations. Huge accomplishment. And what's funny, guys, is that we planned this interview maybe 2 weeks ago, and then Tirthak, I see the explosion of announcements on Facebook, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like nuts timing. So instead of withholding 1% Nation or withholding the information from 1% Nation and talking about your passion for engineering and how you chose Drexel and things like that, which is usually the progression, I really want to jump right into the 30 under 30 topic and talk about that. So really, Tirthak, I have a couple other friends who've done this. Tyler Coleman in gaming, and my buddy Alex Weiler, who worked for Facebook. He runs this company called Eat Street. I haven't talked with Alex, but Tirthak, I would love to hear your entire 30 under 30 story. What you think is the chain reaction of things over your whole life that led to this, how it's been, like the types of people who are coming out and congratulating you, everything. So
okay, so let's get right into this.
Yeah.
So first of all, I would just like to start by saying that it's a huge honor, and we were talking before, and I mentioned this to you. This came out Tuesday, and this being a work week, I still haven't had time to properly sit down by myself and in isolation and process all of this, and what it means for my future. But I feel it in my gut that this is something big, and I'm really grateful to the entire Forbes team for making this happen and putting together this great program. It is a milestone, and I'm very happy that I reached it at the age that I have. So to start with, I don't ever think it was my intention to be on this list. I'll be very honest with you. This was such a distant dream. Of course, everyone knows about this list, and everyone once in their life thinks, oh, that'd be super cool to be on that list. But you can't make that your focus. You don't become an actor to win the Oscars.
Yeah.
To become an actor, to act, to make good movies. So I when I started out on my engineering path, I never thought that this would happen. I just kept doing things that I'm passionate about, and I'm thankful to a lot of people, my current boss, who gave me this opportunity, this wonderful job that we'll talk about later in detail, that allows me to kind of spread out and really follow my engineering passions in an investigative and research sort of way, kind of create new cool things that also help the community. So I guess all of that bundled up and kind of rolled into one after another in the opportunities. And I've read this sentence a lot of places. It's true what they say, if you're doing good work and if you are actually invested in what you're doing, Forbes will find you. So I guess that's the takeaway. Find something you like, do it passionately, give it your all, and the list isn't the be all and end all, but if you actually put in all that work and passion, they will find you. So that's pretty much what I want to say about that.
Yeah. And Tirthak, what do you think would be the single biggest thing that you've done over your years that made you detectable by Forbes?
Again, I don't think it was one thing, to be honest. My entire career trajectory has been to find better ways to generate, transmit, and store and distribute energy, right? To increase efficiencies of our systems with regards to energy production and usage. I started out with a minor project with NASA when I was at Drexel, right, for satellites, and building a new design for the solar panels that go on it to maximize the energy output. And then that led to other research with the dye-synthesized solar cell, perovskite solar cells. That led to more interest into how the electrical grid works. So I got an internship with PJM, which is the Regional Transmission Organization, for those who don't know, for the East Coast, pretty much. That was a huge internship for me. I got to learn the ins and outs of the North American electric grid, how it works. And that experience got me this job where I get to make it better now that I've learned all this stuff about the grid. I can incorporate my own ideas into it and see how to make it better using modern technology. So it all kind of rolled up into one big ball where I'm working on the grid and trying to make it better and more reliable and resilient. Um, so I but there was a project recently. It was a competition hosted by my company, American Electric Power.
Mhm.
And there were like 600 participants, about 400 entries, projects, and my team came second in that. Our idea was declared second, um, and that was a big win for us because it has to do with energy storage, and it has to do with eliminating almost eliminating power outage situations for customers, involving customers into like taking care of the grid, sharing economy kind of structure. So all that went into it, and it's a really cool project. Like I've said before, I can't really talk too much about it.
Yeah, you can't talk about it too much, right?
Yeah, so some things have to be kept on the down low because it's still in progress.
Yeah.
It's a really cool project, and I'm proud to have been part of that team. Everyone on that team was amazing to work with. To all the young engineers out there were 2 interns on that team, and they're in their senior year, but they're still in college. So it's you don't have to be like you don't have to have 5 or 10 years of experience to do something cool in the engineering world. You just need passion, and you need the ability to research and read and imbibe knowledge, and then mix it with your own creative ideas. Anyway.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. I love that.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the essence of engineering, right?
Yeah.
You learn a bunch of things, and then you incorporate it with your own ideas to create something new that is valuable. So I think that caught the attention of a few people who ended up nominating me, including my boss, and that was the hook, I guess, that caught Forbes' attention. And then they looked into my whole past, and then, like I said, this whole body of work, I guess, for lack of a better term, that was sitting there. So they were like, okay, this guy may have some potential, to do some good. I guess that's their thinking. I can't speak on their behalf, but.
Right. Well, and we're going to get into this later when we talk about personal brand, but like, to me, you have lots of people out there who are doing good work, and they do that, whatever, they're 40, 50 hours a week, or even if they love their career so much and they work on this stuff at home, like Thomas Edison, they're candlelighting forever until they invent that light bulb, Yeah. But like when you stumble upon an engineer like you, who not only is crushing their work and building awesome relationships, because I just have to also believe that is what created like the NASA thing into the next thing, and the next thing is the relationships that you have. But then they get to your LinkedIn or however they find you, and it's like, oh, this guy blogs too. Oh, he's got his website too. Oh, he's doing this as well. And it's like, I feel like it's all this other stuff too. Maybe you can speak to that if you've seen a pattern of the other people who are on the list this year. But I feel like it's these people who are like not doing everything, but like the personal brand, and like it's a work-life integration, I think, is what I'm really talking about. That they're telling their story, and they're putting out content, and they're like, that was kind of what I was getting at earlier, is like, did they know about your blog and all this other stuff? But yeah, this is all. I'd love to hear what you see. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I can speak to that a little bit. So yes, first of all, definitely that plays a big role into this kind of a recognition is when you're doing all these things. And you mentioned the term work-life balance. I don't believe in that concept. I think like if you're doing work that you like, you don't need to have a distinction between work and life.
Mm-hmm.
It is just two sides of the same coin. For me personally, like I come home and I'll blog. That's not work to me. That's just a continuation of this one thing that I'm doing 24/7. So yes, it definitely helps to have a diverse portfolio. But that's okay. So I'm trying to find like a way to say this that makes me sound smart.
I try that every day.
But yeah, so okay, so it's not that you're talking about the end result, right? The end result is that I have a blog. The end result is that I have a job where I get to do cool stuff. The end result is I get to be, I don't know, the chairperson of the IPFW industrial board. That's the end result, but it's the why I get to do all those, or why I come to those conclusions. That is what Forbes is looking for, or for that matter, any kind of success. You need the why behind it. And the why is, don't be afraid to fail. Because, since the start of this interview, you've mentioned a few things where I've succeeded in life, right? But there's like a ton of failure behind that. And it's because I've looked at, say, Project X, and I've been like, oh, that seems interesting. Let me try that. Failed. Okay, moving on. What lessons have I learned from that? Okay, don't do this, but this is good, this is good. And hey, I made these 3 friends, who will help me out with Project Y. And then you go and do Project Y. And you kind of do all this. I like to use the Tolkien quote, not all who wander are lost. So that's kind of like why you need to do that, why you need to try your hands at different things. You might not like everything, you might finally settle upon one thing and you do that for the rest of your life. But how do you know that is the one thing that you like if you haven't tried more things? Mm-hmm. If you try more things, it's just law of probability. You'll find 3 more things that you're good at and that people like and that people want. So, happy accidents.
Yeah. Yeah, this failure thing is such a good topic. I did a presentation to some high school students yesterday, and that was one of my slides. I gave them a top 10 format. And my brother and I were just joking. He saw this presentation where it starts with this. It's like, I love to fail. and what you just said also reminds me of what my dad always says. It's like, you don't know what you like until you figure out what you don't like. And you kind of have to go through that and learn and fail and learn and fail and get better. And the way you described it, I'm going to make that a mini clip in this video, do a 60-second. But the way you described it was so good. It's like, okay, what did I learn here from this failure? And then you apply that to the next thing. And I hate that term failure. We almost need a new term for it, because it only really means failure if you quit then, right? Exactly. But like Edison, 10,000 iterations,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You fail if you take away no lessons.
Yeah, love it. Mm-hmm.
And that's basically just it. Like, I can go and hit my head on the wall. That wouldn't be a failure unless I know not to hit my head against the wall anymore.
Yeah.
Right? And if I have taken that lesson away, then I have learned something, and that was not an unnecessary experience, because that would probably happen to me at some time in my life. Mm-hmm. That's why babies get hurt.
Yeah. This is good stuff. And one more little question before we get off this 30 under 30 story and the progression. But this is what Tyler told me, and he said he owes just as much to him being on the 30 under 30 list to the relationships he built. Not that it was all about knowing people in high places, but more about, he just stressed the networking of his career. And, going from thing to thing to thing to thing, and then starting his own company. And your track record is synonymous with that. It's like big thing, awesome thing, lots of failures that somehow usually fall between the cracks, and people don't talk about those, even though those make for better stories, failures, and then how you learn. But can you speak to that a little bit, as like the importance of networking to you, Tirthak?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny that you brought that up, because just yesterday, and I'm like, I have my Facebook open here, but I can't show you, so I'll just read it out to you. One of my old friends, he contacted me yesterday, and he kind of like jokingly asked me any tips on how I can make it next year. So after the initial quip, I said, okay, here's a step-by-step process, and the second point on that is just 3 words: network, 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 right? And the reason behind that is ideation in isolation is useless. It is just useless. I might have the greatest idea in the world, right? But if it doesn't match up to people's expectations or desires, or address the problems that they're having, it's useless, right? Like, I might invent a warp drive right now, but if the world doesn't want that, then it's not going to happen, and no one's going to value it, right? Uh, does that mean that it does not take brains to do that? Yes, it does. But so what networking does is create that usefulness context in your efforts, in your projects. Like, for example, right now I'm doing this interview, right? And traditionally, an interview is supposed to be about the person who's being interviewed, right? So this is about me, technically, right? But I'm learning so much because I've never interviewed a person on video. I've never done YouTube shows. So I'm watching you and I'm learning, right? And I might use that someday in the future. So it's just the same concept with doing various things, trying your hand at various things. Try various people. That's just networking, isn't it? You talk to like 100 people, you'll get 10 who inspire you, 2 who help you out, and that one person who changes your life. Right. So, and in the context of this Forbes 30 under 30 list making process, I'll tell you a funny story. I actually, I started connecting with, this. I started focusing on LinkedIn and posting stuff on LinkedIn like about 6 months back. I was like, hey, LinkedIn is undergoing kind of sort of like a cultural revolution. People are becoming more honest, and they're posting things that are not just like, hey, these are 10 steps to get a job, or these are 5 things you must never say in an interview. It's real stuff from real people in their lives, and that kind of attracted me. So I started like integrating into that community, and I found a lot of people in my industry who later turned out to be I didn't even know because they didn't post it on their profile. They were previous 30 under 30 winners.
Wow.
Right. And then one of the judges, also David Freed, if you look at the energy list this year, he's one of the previous winner who became a judge this year. He's also a connection, and I've also talked to him, right? And at that point, I just, you start to realize that out of like the, I don't know, like 3,000 connections that I have, he's just one person, but you'll never get to that one person if you don't network, and you learn something from everyone. Sometimes you learn what to do, sometimes you learn what not to do. Right. But those are types of learning. So yeah, networking is so essential to success in any field.
Love that. Yeah, it's like the biggest thing I talk about. This is great. So thank you so much for the 30 under 30 story, Tirthak. I love all that. It's so good. I mean, anybody who accomplishes anything can look back and then take tidbits and then spread that so that other people can accomplish great things. So I really appreciate it. And I know 1% Nation does. So now that we have the biggest highlight thing not out of the way, because it will intertwine itself in the rest of this interview, but really want to take some steps back here and talk about the biggest question that I get all the time, which is, how do I know what type of engineering to pursue? So Tirthak, you have become massively passionate about energy within a foundation of electrical engineering. So let's go all the way back and talk about how you found your passion for electrical engineering. What made you choose that?
Sure. So I'll start with some facts. So I'm from India, right? And India has, at least used to have, it's changing now, right? It's really becoming a lot better because a lot of passionate people working on this problem. It has used to have one of the spottiest grids and most unreliable grid systems amongst the third world nations even. Even today, there's 300 million Indian citizens who have no access to power. And this just blows my mind.
Yeah.
And, millions more live with irregular, power supplies. And it's just, there's a lot that can be done to better it. So actually, I was always interested in physics, theoretical physics actually, because I don't know, I was just drawn to it. I kind of like thinking about the smallest things and the biggest things, and physics really had all of that and kind of explained all the questions I had, like why does this do this or why does that look like that? I like answers. Physics had them for me personally. For some it's biology, for some it's math. Um, so I wanted to take up physics, but I wasn't good enough. I wasn't smart enough. I'm not even I'm not even kidding right now. My grades were horrible.
My grades weren't the best either. Yeah, I'm glad to hear that.
So I don't know. I've never like really flourished in an academic environment in the way that is traditionally considered successful. My professors like me. They know I'm smart enough to answer their questions, but I don't know. This test taking is not for me. Anyway, so in 2011, I joined engineering because at that point I wasn't sure about electrical engineering in particular, but it was the closest thing to physics. And why engineering is because I felt, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm still wrong, I still do not know, but so far it's worked out for me, is I wanted to move away from the theoretical stuff and more into the practical applications, because I'm a very impatient person. If I do something, I immediately want to see results, right? So I felt like engineering would be more helpful towards that side of my personality. Like if I build something, I can see that it's built and it's working the way I want it to, or it's not.
Okay, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's just a facet of my personality, though. It's not like an academic reason. So I got into electrical engineering in 2011, and then in 2012 we had a massive, like one of the worst power outages in India, like in decades, right? There were actually two on 30th and 31st July 2012. Like about 620 million people were out. And it was a cascading power outage. It was a blackout. Some breakers failed, and then the fault just cascaded throughout the system. And it just devastated it. Like almost half of India's population had no power. 22 states. Yeah. And around that time, again, I would not like to share this in much detail, but there was a personal story that happened at that time that happened because there was no power. And that really kind of devastated me. And I was like, this is not how, like, power should not be a luxury. It should be a basic human right. Energy should be a basic human right. By the way, let me not give you the impression that it's because of like some kind of like neglect or something on the part of the engineers in India. No,
Right.
It just happens with the current state of the electric grid that we're in, with the technology that we're using. This is expected. It happens once in a while. So it's not anyone's fault, but it happened. And I was just in my head, I was young. Optimism plays a part in that. I was like, no, there has to be a better way, and if no one else is working on it, I'll do it. And there are people working on it, obviously. I was just young and foolish. So I started like reading into it, and that's when I really got into electrical engineering and the whole energy problem. And I was like, well, I'm in the best place to work on this energy problem. Electrical engineering is kind of like hitting the mother lode on solving the world's energy crisis. And I kind of like started to diversify my portfolio of knowledge in that aspect of like, what are new techniques or technologies that we can use to generate power? How can we make the system redundant? How can we make it more efficient, so that even if a blackout occurs, even if there are cascades, there's like, safety in place, et cetera, et cetera. So that's exactly when I got really into it, and that I guess that passion has just carried because of that personal tragedy, plus everything else surrounding that. And that just carried through, and I got more and more fascinated. Then I came to the States. I got to work with satellites, which was really cool. And I got to in at NASA, and it was just amazing. So the reason I came to the States was, well, because I like the education system here better, but also, in terms of opportunities and stuff. But also because I wanted to learn how this part of the world does things. Like I said, this is kind of like a mass scale networking event, right? My education here. So I'm kind of learning. I'm still learning. I'm still talking to people. I'm still like understanding how the grid here works. If I can help make it better, that's, a bonus. And then, kind of one day change the world.
Yeah,
Maybe.
man. I love that. I mean, I've heard stories like this before. Engineers who come from Africa and even people who come from the West and they want to improve their community because it has some sort of struggle. I think that is the best reason to pursue a certain career. Like they want to be a veterinarian because they love animals and want to save them, or doctor, or engineers. That's one thing that's awesome about being an engineer is you do have the ability to change the world. And in your case, go help your home country one day. So I guess is that your goal, is to go back, or what are you thinking about that?
So, I don't know. I fail at thinking way too ahead into the future. I like to, but it's also kind of my job. But when it comes to like myself, I can't. But yeah, I think ultimately that's the goal.
Right.
Learn a bunch of stuff around the world and use it to help people wherever help is needed. It need not be my country, like the electrical grid in the Midwest is also really aging, and it needs a lot of revamping and attention right now. So I'm here because I can help here. And then maybe I'll move to somewhere else and help there, and
yeah, just let it sort of happen. I think I think having an end all be all goal, like help India one day, is really good. But I think you got it right, like overthinking it and trying to plan out, like, okay, by 2025, I think that's crazy. Like, it is impossible. Like, this whole 5-year, what's your 5-year plan? That is so ridiculous. What I ask people is, what are you trying to accomplish in the next 60 to 90 days? Because you just found out about this Forbes thing 5 days ago, right? Like, that is going to change your life now, And like when you got accepted at Drexel, you could have ended up in California. Like, there's no way to possibly forecast. So I love that attitude. This is good. And I'm sorry to bring up the tragic story. I do appreciate you incorporating into the story because it is a part of your story. And
it's a big part. And
yeah. And whatever.
Although I wouldn't be comfortable sharing it online, but I just want people to know that it's not just, you don't get that out of the blue.
Yeah.
You have, and no one can tell you what your story is. No one can come and tell you that, oh, hey, that's why you should do this. That has to come from inside you. You need to find what motivates you. So,
100%. I love that, man. It's not a little tidbit. Pull that out and make a little Instagram video. So this is really good. So Tirthak, I love how you found, like, your story is seriously very inspiring. How you wanted to pursue electrical engineering to get into energy. I really love that. Let's talk a little bit about Drexel. I talk a lot about like big versus small, and Drexel's got a pretty good engineering brand out here on the East Coast. I'm curious if people would really know, because I applied to Drexel.
Right.
I'm curious if people would really know about it out in like California and things like this. But I'm curious if Drexel was one of your top picks when you're transitioning from India, or like what was it about your school choice? And we don't have to be on this topic too long, but love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. So yes, it was one of my top choices, and I did apply to a bunch of schools. I think a few, I think 2 in Canada, and the rest in the States, because this was my main focus to come over here. The reason I picked Drexel over everything else that I got into was and again, I had no way of knowing this before I came here, but the size of the school felt right. I kind of wanted that big school experience in a big city, but it was also just comfortable enough to get that personal attention. And like all other schools, obviously it has its shortcomings, right? And that's stuff that I've talked about with my professors, directly. I've talked about with the administration over there when I was a student. And that's one thing I like about Drexel, is that uh, the democratic process is really strong. Like you can literally stand on student square and you talk to a professor and say, hey man, your class isn't working out because of this, and it's happened. Like 3 of my friends and myself, we went to a professor and said, hey, so can you change these things in your class, and done. Right?
Wow.
But, yeah, obviously it depends on the people, at any given point of time, but I just felt that that culture exists in Drexel, and my choice was validated. But the major thing that played a role in my decision was the co-op program. That was my PJM stuff. So 6 months that is integrated into the academic structure, and you just get to work full time as a full time employee. That's just, and the support you get and the network that Drexel has. I think it is the best co-op program in the country.
It's pretty good. That's why I looked at it, because it's so like prestigious within co-op.
Yeah, the co-op is just a wonderful experience. I know some people who came in initially wanting to do just one co-op, but extended their university stay by 2 more years because they wanted to do the extra 2.
That's great.
It's wonderful. So that's actually why I chose Drexel, and they were also transferring the most credits.
Right.
At the time, that was a big concern for me. So.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta be influenced by that as well. But I have heard lots of pro co-op comments from people who chose co-op schools, and basically as strong as what you said, is that they're kind of attracted to the co-op. That was one of the biggest peak points of schools. For example, McGill is another one that was mentioned for strong co-op in Canada. So did you apply to, I'm curious, because I lived in Canada for 4 years in Vancouver. Did you apply to Waterloo? I'm curious which Canadian schools the two.
Queens and Toronto.
Yeah, great schools, both of them. Yeah, it's really cool. Sweet. Okay, really, really glad to hear the stuff about Drexel. So this is a good opportunity to ask you a question that I get a lot, and honestly, I don't know how to help a lot of these students. But with you here, someone who not only has done it and can speak directly from your experience, but clearly has had massive success in the West. A lot of students from India, they ask about what you have done. How can I start my education in India and finish it out in the West? How can I go to grad school in the West? How can I just become an engineer in the West? So love to hear what your tips would be for these students. And being that you can kind of look retrospectively, maybe there were some things that you would have done differently. Love to hear your thoughts on that, Tirthak.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a question that has come up, and a lot of people have asked me before, because as you can understand, I do have a lot of people back home who want to follow in my footsteps or something like that. It's a 2-part answer, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of universities in the States. So getting into a university here in the West, in the States, or in London, or whatever, what have you, right? It's not the difficult part. If you do just good enough in school, you keep your grades up, even if you have like fail grades, there are some universities who'll take you. So it's not the getting into a university here or coming over here that's the big part. I don't think that's the question that you should be focusing on. It's how to prepare yourself for what to do after you get here to be successful, right? I always use this analogy is, if you ask me nicely enough, I will invite you to dinner, right? But if you need to be an interesting enough dinner guest for us to have a good conversation and for me to remember you after you leave. So what my advice would be is, just immerse yourself in the culture of the country that you are going to. Read, watch, listen, talk to people, network. We live in the age of the internet, which is a huge plus, right? If someone hits you up on LinkedIn, right, and asks you, hey Jake, so can you tell me why why people in America, like small talk, or what's the conversation patterns like in the States, right? And then you tell him like, hey, so these are the kind of topics that you can initiate a conversation with. These are the fillers that we use. These are the topics that people like to talk about. These are the sports, and these are the pop culture references, etc. You get into that culture, and then you come here, and then one day you're sitting in class, and then your professor makes a pop culture reference, and you get it, and you start a conversation around that. And then when the professor goes home, he's like, oh yeah, that guy was funny. What was his name? Okay, XYZ. And then it builds a personal connection, and then you get an internship out of it. So these connections are not always visible. They're not always straightforward. But if you're going to someone's house, you need to do your homework, right? You need to know about them, know what they like to talk about, what their literature is, and everything outside of engineering too. Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying you need to change yourself. By the way, let's get that clear. I'm not saying you need to start liking rap music or pop music from the Americas. You don't need to do that, but you need to educate yourself to help you build that platform of networking when you come here. So you can come here anytime you want, but then how are you going to be successful if you don't know how to build those inroads?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, my summary to all this is that it still gets back to the relationship building. Like, if you got to have that language barrier crushed. And I love your analogies into pop culture. And the dinner thing, I'm probably gonna end up stealing that. I love that what you said. Yeah, I might invite you to dinner, but are you interesting enough for me to remember you? 1% Nation, remember that. I love that. It's really good. Sweet. Okay. It's good. It's good advice, because what I usually tell them is just work on your English as much as possible and build relationships in advance. You mentioned the LinkedIn stuff, so I guess what I've been telling them is okay.
Skills is just a part of like everything that I was trying to say. Obviously, that's the first step that you need to have, and that that automatically grows. Like, people ask me, "Hey, your English is really good. How do you do?" Yeah, of course I learned it at school, but I also immersed myself in the literature. And that's where you get all the idiosyncrasies, all the phrases, all the way that the real people talk, not just like newscasters on TV.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound like CNN or Fox.
Yeah, that's really good. This is awesome. Okay, man, I love all the stories of finding your electrical engineering turned into energy, passion, and how you chose Drexel, and how you made it into the States. Love that. So let's talk about your biggest passion today, Tirthak.
Sure.
Let's talk about grid modernization. Let's talk about sustainability engineering. I actually get a lot of questions about how can I have a career in sustainability engineering, and I'm like, let me get back to you on that one. Well, now with a thought leader in the room remotely, can provide some value to these people. So I guess what I would like to do is, first of all, let's do two parts. What's got you pumped up right now to be in this field, to be able to have an impact in grid modernization, and then what can people do right now to have a career in sustainability, sustainable engineering practices, and everything under the sun in that regard?
So it's obviously not a very simple answer, right? I mean, and the answer itself is the problem, is that there's many paths to it, right? I don't believe that there's one such thing called sustainability engineering. Sure, you might have like a college degree somewhere, but that's not. I don't think that's what you're asking, right? How to engineer a sustainable world is, I think, a better way of putting that question. In that regards, like I said, there's like many paths. Like you had a guest this morning, right? She is a water resources engineer, I believe. Right, so that's one path, right? That is also sustainability in a shape and form, right? There's environmental engineers, right? There's me, who's working on the energy side of things, right? So there's facets to it. There's a lot of things that you can do. In the interest of like keeping this within the time limit, I will focus on the energy part of it. if that's okay with you, because that's really all I know.
Yeah.
So we are at the cusp of. I was talking to someone the other day, and I said, this is the time, like right after Rome fell. This is the rebuilding part. Right now, all everything that we know about energy systems is being reevaluated. It's been rethought of. It's being looked at, and like, we might want to take a look at that, and change that, optimize this, make that more efficient. And why that is happening is because of startups. And I've mentioned this in one of my blog pieces. Is the concept of startups came up in like the 90s, late 90s, and really in mid 2000s, it like that really inflamed the public's imagination. And what the startups have done, what Silicon Valley has done, is it's created this culture where innovation is king, right? And especially in the technology world, what that means is if you follow, kind of like an analogy of Moore's law, is that if you put the fuel in, it just shoots up the innovation in the technology world, right? So we're at that point where we're getting stuff that we thought we wouldn't be getting for another 20, 40 years, right? Let's take a subset of that for illustrating this point. Electric vehicles, right? It's here. Autonomous cars plus electric vehicles, they're here, right? They're on our roads. So we can't, all these new technologies are coming up that we need to be able to support to make them successful, right? Like I talked about, like previously, ideation in isolation is pointless, right? So everything needs to work cohesively for all these wonderful, amazing, groundbreaking ideas to prosper and change our civilization as we know it. And one of the basic ways we can support that is rebuilding our grid to be able to support these new types of loads, these new peaks and troughs, right? For example, with renewable energy, increasing adoption of renewable energy, what happens, right? Like sun's shining, you're getting solar power, cloud floats over, dip, and then again rise, right? So all the harmonics from that, we have to address all these new problems are cropping up that we didn't have to worry about like for 100 years. Mm-hmm. Literally, this industry hasn't seen innovation in about 100 years, because why would we? Because it works.
Right.
If it broke, why fix it? Well, now it's broke, or it's about to be broke. So now everyone's getting together in like rooms and rethinking the electric industry or the energy industry, right? Fuel cells, batteries, what are clean power sources, and all these things are being thought of. So circling back to your original question, if you want to get into like sustainable engineering in and around energy, there's a lot of avenues, right? Do your homework, find which one you like, right? Should I talk about grid modernization now, or is that a separate
whatever
question?
you want, because I'm just about to ask you about what you would think are the core avenues. You can talk about grid modernization. Yeah, I love this. Keep right on rolling, man.
So like I said, a lot of these technologies are coming up, like if I had told you like 5 years ago that drones would become integral to delivering power to your house, you would have laughed at me. But now it's a reality, because drones are being used for inspecting overhead transmission lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're at this like confluence of all these technologies. So you don't need to be limited. That's the advantage that young engineers have today in the sustainability arena, is that you really could do anything and turn it into sustainability engineering. You could be you don't even need to be an engineer. You could be in finance, right? No, I'm being real. Yeah. You could be finance. You could be working with cryptocurrency and work out a way for homeowners to share energy using cryptocurrency without like cutting out the middleman, right? And that's happened in New York. Wow. It's happening, right? So my point is, the question is not how can I get into sustainable energy engineering. Uh, the question rather is what are my skill sets? What am I strong in? And how I can turn that into creating a platform for sustainability. I think that's what you should be focusing on. You can literally take anything and turn it into sustainability engineering.
Love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's really good because then it's much less exclusive to engineers.
Right.
We're not like these sustainability gatekeepers, guys.
Exactly.
Everyone can have a career. I love that. So you mentioned something about all these different avenues to ensuring that you can either have a career within energy or maybe sustainability in general. What would you say are like the core pillars, the core avenues that people can start when they're beginning their research in these areas?
So electrical engineering is definitely one of the big ones, right? If you know how electricity flows, that gives you a really big insight into the energy world. So some of the concrete steps that I would take is do research while you're in school, right? Like I did research on solar cells. You could do research on something related to that. Then do internships, please, for the love of God. That's not a plus. That's not something that's optional. It's not an add-on. It's integral to your education. Go find internships. Even if it's unpaid, just if you're able to take that on. And I know it's not possible for everyone. It wasn't for me. I wouldn't have been able to take an unpaid internship at that time. But whatever you can find, work with a professor, right? Become a lab assistant, right? Get your hands dirty and start working with stuff. If you're an engineer, you gotta get your hands dirty, right? You gotta learn how things are put together and etc. And in your spare time, expand your horizons. Go to conferences if you can, right? Attend guest lectures. Read the magazines on this issues, right? Books or all that good stuff. And then once you graduate, 80% of you, and I'm sorry to say this, but this is just how our world is structured, 80% of you will get boring jobs, right? I am really, really, really lucky. And that's what I was talking to you about. Like, that's why I give so much credit to whatever little success I've had to the people who've helped me along the way, is that I've been extremely lucky to get really good bosses who have given me these like vistas of opportunity, right? That does not happen. That is unreal, right? So just have practical expectations that you will get into a boring job, but this is the good part, is that you can take the lessons from that and start building on your own, right? Start a blog. You may hit up on some idea that someone reads the blog and then is like, hey, this is really cool, I want to collaborate with you on this.
Yep.
Right? Approach people on LinkedIn. You're not limited to just your job. And this circles back to the whole work-life balance equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the basic avenues for young engineers starting out to get their hands into all these like different pies, and then find one that they like and then grab hold of that, and follow that path. So that would be my best advice for starting.
This is great, man. This is awesome. I'm like taking notes myself over here. Super good. Awesome. And is there just like within grid modernization, your true niche, your expertise, your field? Is there like an emerging technology or a something that's like gonna really be a game changer? Maybe there's an existing game changer that I'm totally unaware of, but is there something that's like within your direct field right now that's
Right.
got you really excited?
Yes, but there's a couple. It's so the whole purpose of, so my job role did not exist until they hired me.
Yeah.
Or rather, they created that job role and then they hired me because they thought I'd be a good fit for doing this, right? So this is not a traditional role. This is, again, like I said, people are rethinking stuff. So this is part of that rethinking process. And AP is really progressive in that regard, which I really admire. That the senior leadership really thinks into the future, looks into the future and does all these things. So So my job is basically looking at a suite of technology, right? It's not one thing. So right now, I'll tell you some of the things that I'm working with right now. Some of the basic ones are that other utilities or other companies have also done is putting intelligent line sensors up on the lines to kind of help with voltage detection, detecting when there's an outage, so that we can help get the customers back on faster, right? That's assuming that there's an outage. On the other side of that, there's energy storage, right? Decentralized distributed energy storage. Like if I put so there's levels to that, for example. And I think energy storage is going to be the big player, by the way. This is the thing that's got me really excited for at least the next 5 years. That's going to change how utilities define their services. Because right now, if I put a solar panel on your roof and I put a battery in your garage, right, assuming everything works at 100% efficiency, which it doesn't, but if it does, then you don't need a utility to provide you power. And I'm simplifying everything down, by the way, for if anyone is listening to this, I'm kind of like an expert in utility, you know what I'm talking about. I'm simplifying stuff down. Don't post in the comment section that he doesn't know what he's talking about. Anyway.
They know that you know what you're talking about, by the way.
But in a very simplified world, then the utility gets cut off. So what's happening is utilities are changing their definition of what it means to be a utility. It's not that it's moving away from the traditional model of like wires and poles and power comes from one source to a bunch of houses, right? Power sources are getting decentralized. Microgrids are coming up. That's one that I'm really excited about. And energy storage, if you put it at the station, maybe that's too complex, but if you put it at the central point, and the wires break in a storm, then it doesn't matter if you have a battery at the central point, the customer is still out. If you put the battery in the customer's house, then it's a different game altogether. But traditionally, utilities don't venture into houses. Like we have this point called the metering point, where the electric meter is. So traditionally, utilities don't go beyond that or touch anything inside the customer's house because of legal liability issues and etc. So that definition is changing. There's utilities who are doing behind the meter stuff now, right? And that's a game changer because if we can get behind the meter, then can we do the lights? Can we do the ACs? Can we do all the electrical equipment and make them more efficient? Can we be like a one-stop shop for all your energy needs? So these questions are coming up. Right?
Wow.
So yeah. And then there's cool stuff like grid automation, like if there's a storm, tree falls on a branch of line, and power goes out, but this opens, this closes automatically. The grid kind of like senses, okay, this is the best configuration to bring up power to like most people. And so there's distributed automation, all that cool stuff going on.
Yeah, I know it has to feel really cool. This is part of the reason why I chose an industry in traffic engineering because of its attachment to technology, intelligent transportation systems. But it's got to feel awesome to be a part of an industry that is literally evolving every day right before your eyes. And if you can be on the top of the wave, surfing that wave, you're going to have an exciting career. And I know you can speak to that. So I'm really excited to see where things go in your field and in general for all of us who are doing some progressive engineering stuff. So this is great, Tirthak. Really, really awesome value that you're adding about all this stuff, your story, what you're working on right now. And even though you can't directly talk about that project, it's okay. But all the stuff, like I'm learning so much from you right now. This is part of the excitement of getting specialists on the show, niche experts who really know their industry. So this is great. Because I had a power engineer on here, but he works in like a power plant, sort of power generation, and it's in Iowa, so it's probably very coal fired. So it's very much different from your sector. So this is really good. So
by the way, they're the guys who get all the money in the utility business. That is a secret, by the way. And next time you talk to him, just tell him that I said that.
Okay.
Because I'm in distribution, and I'm thinking he's in the generation part of it, and those guys get all the big bucks, and we're really salty about it.
Okay, I'll have to introduce you guys. He's super active in the 1% Engineer Facebook group. He's a cool dude. So really quick, this is great. I mean, you have already smashed this interview out of the park, Tirthak, so thank you so much. I do really want to, maybe just sort of like in summary, I want to talk a little bit about personal brand, even though we've really hammered it already.
Right.
You know, just all the stuff you've been involved with, and advocating for yourself in networking and putting out content. I think putting out content is so big. I'm sure that you've had things happen based on the LinkedIn articles that you do and running your own blog. So that's really good. But I guess I don't know whether to ask you your biggest piece of advice for people who are trying to have the courage to become that personal brand, or I mean, I already know that you've had things happen to you because of it. So maybe, yeah, that is what we should say is for engineers who want to be found and want to do all that extra stuff and be a personal brand, what would you suggest to them today?
I mean, and we've talked a little bit about this, and you know, the primary advice is just try and fail. Because I cannot tell, you know, there's a general audience. I'm not talking to a specific person. If I knew that person, I would be like, oh, okay, so what are your strengths? Blah, blah. Are you good at art? Then, you know, you should start like a Tumblr or something. But if for a general audience, just try different things, you know, try the things that you think you're good at. See if it leads to anywhere, you know. So you have to know when to start and you have to know when to stop. Right. You can't be like I can't sing to save my life. Right. So if I like get carried away and I start like putting out YouTube videos of me doing cover songs, that would be horrible for everyone. So you need to be self-aware. That's a vital point. You need to be self-aware. You need to know your strengths and your weaknesses, and you need to branch out, try a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and in what you'll realize is that at the end of that journey, you know, in the trying process, you found a couple of things that you're really good at and that people are liking about you, and that you follow that down the rabbit hole, and you know, it creates your personal brand. Like, I'm the guy who writes the blog. I'm the guy who puts out content on LinkedIn that people like. You can't predict this, is what I'm trying to say. Like when I started on LinkedIn, I had like maybe 184 connections. I now have like in 3 months I had reached like 3,000.
Yeah, I saw that.
So, you know, it's a little bit of you trying different things. It's a little bit of self-awareness of when to stop doing things that's not working out, and it's also a little bit of luck. I will give you that. It's you know, I've lucked onto a lot of things in my life. You know, I didn't need to have the parents that I did, but I do, and you know, they're wonderful, and I couldn't have done anything I have if I hadn't had them as parents, and that's just the truth. So yeah, a little bit of you trying, you know, you go halfway, luck meets you halfway, and that's where the magic happens. But yeah, use the internet. That's one concept. Use the internet. You know, you can do a lot of things. Like you're doing YouTube videos, right? I'm doing a blog, and someone else is doing Tumblr or Instagram or something. You know, just don't waste your time. That's
yeah.
So many talented people do that, and it pains me.
Yeah, do stuff, build stuff, make stuff.
Yeah,
be productive. I love that.
Yeah.
So Tirthak, are you ready for the 1% lightning round?
I am.
Great. What is the one book that you would recommend to 1% Nation, and why? Tell us why.
Okay. The one book that I really, you know, when people ask me this question, I like to say Wonderland: How Play Made the Modern World. It's by Steven Johnson. It's basically a story of how innovation comes from just messing around with stuff. You know, there's no straight paths in the world. Innovation is a culture rather than a set of formulaic steps. So I would, for all the young engineers out there, I would highly recommend that book, and I would highly recommend imbibing the spirit of that book into the lessons. It's a bunch of stories about like, oh, this guy was playing around with this, and then he invented that, right? But take that lesson that branch out, try different things, and have that innovative, pioneering spirit inside you.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. You can't connect the dots looking forward, guys. They only make sense looking backwards. Love that. Love that. So, Tirthak, what is a personal habit that leads to your success?
personal habit is I'm very impatient. I know that sounds like the opposite of what a good habit should be, but I'm just so impatient that I wanna get stuff done like right now. Like I read an article in a magazine and I'm like, oh wow, that's a problem. How can we solve it? I grab a piece of like paper or like a napkin if I'm sitting in a restaurant and I start working it out. And 99% of the time I don't find a solution, obviously, because I'm not that smart. But it's the habit, it's the practice of doing that leads to better things.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Can you share with us a quick lightning round version of a mistake that you've made in your career so that 1% Nation can learn from that?
Oh, I don't make mistakes. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I made a ton of mistakes. So one thing that I would change if I could go back is I wish, honestly, I wish I had branched out a little bit more in when I was in high school, because it and had made better relationships with my teachers and my fellow students, because a lot of them have went on to do like a lot of good things. And I kind of like, I started the whole network because I was very shy, and I started changing towards the end of high school. I forced myself into it. So I wish I had done that, all the debating stuff that you saw and the art and stuff. And I wish I had started branching out a little earlier, and becoming more aware of the world that I live in. Maybe I would have been 30 under 30 like 5 years ago. I'm kidding.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. And then final lightning round question, and then we'll hear from you about where 1% Nation can find your work. But what is looking back on your whole life, what's the single biggest piece of advice, the best life tip that you've ever received?
There's one that I got recently from a very famous person who I've been working on with for something that I can't say. She's Julie Friedman Steele. You can find her on LinkedIn. She's an amazing, amazing lady, and just look her up. Mind blown.
The name rings a bell.
Yeah. She's pretty famous.
Yeah.
Anyway, she called me the night off when I got the result of the Forbes announcement, and she said, "Don't believe your own press." That's one of the recent pieces of advice that I know it's going to stick with me, and that's going to keep me honest. And just going back a few years ago, someone told me, and this is my advice, my final piece of advice to 1% Nation, is, and this is something that I came up with, I think, but maybe someone told me, I can't remember right now, but the word stuck with me, is take your work seriously, not yourself. That's the single greatest piece of advice I've ever received. Your work is important, not you. So
I love that. I love that. Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I just looked her up, see all the stuff she's involved with. That's really good to have. I guess you'd probably consider her a mentor.
Yeah, she is definitely like a dream mentor, and like it just happened because I just reached out to her on LinkedIn. I didn't even expect her to reply, but she's a wonderful lady and very supportive. And she said, "Hey, I have a question for you about this stuff." And I was like, "Yeah, I'd be more than happy to help out where I can." And so
yeah, that's awesome. So you guys reach out. Sometimes just cold messaging people on LinkedIn will result in something that you never expected. So go for it. Always go for it. So Tirthak, I have been so excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to enlighten 1% Nation, tell us about your story, and teach us about your experiences. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And where can 1% Nation find you? I'm sure you can talk about your website and blog. And If you have any final words of wisdom, go ahead, and then we'll say goodbye.
Final piece of advice. I don't like handing out advice, but you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. It's true. So go ahead, make mistakes, fail spectacularly. Just don't make the same mistake twice. That's all.
Yeah.
And you can find me at my website, which is just my name.com, tirthaksaha.com, and there's my blog, which is called thefuturistarchives.com. It's pretty easily searchable, and I guess you'll have the links up or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Pretty active there, and I do see all the messages that you guys send me, even if I don't reply until a few days later. So yeah, I'd be happy to hear from anyone who has a question. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Tirthak. See you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hey, 1% Nation, I hope you enjoyed that interview replay with Tirthak. If you did, consider subscribing because I release videos 2 times a week for engineering success. Comment below if you have a question, and as always, guys, thanks for watching the 1% Engineer Show, and stay hungry on your quest to become a 1% engineer. Cheers!